If you are pregnant or you've recently had a baby, this podcast is for you. I am your host, Kath Bequee, a physiotherapist working in women's health and mum of three. Join me each week as we dive into all things pregnancy care, childbirth and postnatal recovery, helping you have a wonderful pregnancy and afterbirth experience. And don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. Well, hello and welcome everyone. My name is Kath Bequee from Fitness Mama, which is an online community of pregnant and postnatal women helping them have active pregnancies, confident childbirths and strong postnatal recoveries, helping them get back to doing what they love with confidence and a bubba by their side. Are you pregnant and you're perhaps a bit unsure about breastfeeding and you want to know if there's anything that you can do to potentially help prepare for breastfeeding while still pregnant? Or are you a second-time pregnant mama who hasn't had an amazing experience first time round and you want to set yourself up for the best chance of success with breastfeeding second time round? If you answered yes to any of these, keep listening, because today I'm bringing on the amazing Susie Prout from Susie Prout Lactation to talk about 4 tips to prepare for breastfeeding while still pregnant. Susie Prout is a registered midwife and international board certified lactation consultant from Perth. She is also a mum of 3 young children. Susie helps new mums learn how to breastfeed and also helps with any problems that come up along the way. She believes breastfeeding education needs to be relatable, realistic, and for the modern mum. And Susie also runs the Australian Breastfeeding Podcast. In this episode, we discuss the benefits of education and getting informed while pregnant, as opposed to waiting until your bubba has arrived. We discuss support networks, thinking about your village, and thinking about the support you want around yourself while breastfeeding. Susie talks to us about milk supply, how it is established and maintained, and discusses what supply and demand really means. We talk breast pumps. Do we need to buy a breast pump when pregnant? Or should we wait until we've had our baby? Susie provides some great insights into the different types of pumps and their uses. And last but not least, we discuss antenatal expressing, which is a manual expressing while pregnant. And so much more, so get ready for this amazing episode. But before we jump into this episode, if you haven't already heard, there is a Fitness Mama podcast launch giveaway. To say thank you for joining me on this fun journey of starting a podcast, there are a few prizes going up for grabs. These prizes are perfect if you are pregnant or you've recently had a baby. To go into the draw to win the main prize of a gift recovery box and 3 months free membership to Fitness Mama, or there are also runners-up prizes of 1 of 5 free 3 months membership to Fitness Mama, all you need to do is head to fitnessmama.com/giveaway and simply enter your name and email address. It's super easy to do and the link is in the show notes. If you win or you're a runners-up, you'll have access to online workouts, amazing resources, guest speakers, and have support from myself, perfect for any stage of pregnancy or after birth. This giveaway is closing really soon on Friday the 16th of October, in just a few days, so don't miss out. Right, let's get into the show. So thank you for joining me today, Susie. We were just talking off air about the World Breastfeeding Week and what a crazy week you've just had.
Yeah, look, that is the biggest week for me of the year. I really like it. I think it's so important. But yeah, it certainly is a crazy week. It's getting lots of education out there. It's getting lots of support to women. And it's great. It's also really tough for some women whose breastfeeding journeys didn't go to plan. So I'm always really mindful of that. But no, it's a really exciting week.
Absolutely. And would you say that it's gaining more traction and there's more awareness around World Breastfeeding Week in the last few years compared to even, say, 5-10 years ago?
Yeah, definitely. And I think a lot of it is to do with social media and health professionals now coming onto social media, because we have these platforms now that we can start to educate and support ourselves, where before that we didn't have a way of getting things out to the wider community, which is so awesome because it means that girls hear about breastfeeding. Girls in pregnancy hear about breastfeeding a lot before they've even had their baby. And so it's not like you've had your baby and like, oh my gosh, I haven't even thought about breastfeeding. It's like, well, there's so much you can do before in pregnancy and learn about to kind of help you have a successful transition.
Absolutely, and that's what we're going to be discussing today. So ways to help prepare yourself for breastfeeding during pregnancy. And personally, this is all close to my heart because being a physio working in women's health, I know and understand the knowledge and power that prior knowledge can have. You know, take, for example, pelvic floor awareness. If women are aware of pelvic floor or what their pelvic floor is even and how to strengthen the muscles when they're pregnant, it can potentially help so many issues later down the track or help to manage things and help that awareness. So the prevention and prior knowledge is awesome. So to talk about it in terms of breastfeeding is super exciting.
Yeah, no, I love talking about this. I love talking about preparing to breastfeed because I feel that the more we know about breastfeeding while we're still pregnant, when we've got the time, then we're going to have a more successful transition into breastfeeding. And so there's a few things, and I've got 4 top tips, I would say, about what you need to look at when you are still pregnant. And the first thing that I always want to put the utmost importance on is antenatal education. So obviously most women will go and have birth education classes, whether that's at the hospital or whether that's privately, and they will learn about labour and birth and all of that. And there is always an element of breastfeeding education within those courses, but they usually just touch on it. You might get, half an hour in your 6-hour course on breastfeeding. And it is tricky because everyone, myself included, when you are pregnant, all you think about is the birth. You get fixated about the birth. It's kind of scary and exciting to you. You don't know how it's going to go. But if you can, to think past that, because your baby will come out one way or the other, and it will be a relatively quick process in terms of when we're thinking about how long we're going to be breastfeeding for. And then once you've had your baby, a lot of girls, I've worked as a midwife in the hospital for many years, a lot of girls will say, oh my gosh, I just never thought this part would be so hard. Now the baby's here, your baby's been given to you, the midwife has gone out the room and you've got this baby and you need to learn how to feed him or her. So a lot of girls will say to me, I wish that I'd learnt about it when I had the time before in pregnancy. So antenatal education you can do a multitude of ways. You can see a private lactation consultant in pregnancy. So lots of lactation consultants will do an antenatal consult. And what I really like about that is you get a one-to-one with this person and then you get to build a rapport. So if you see a lactation consultant in your area, you've already met her. She knows your wishes, you know her style, and then if you gel, when you've had your baby and you go home, if you have any problems, you've then got someone to then call because you've seen her already, and it's not like, oh my gosh, now I'm going to go and Google and find a lactation consultant when my baby's 5 days old.
And having that trust and confidence as well, because I remember when I first started breastfeeding, it was such a foreign experience, obviously, to have given birth and the next thing you know, your midwife's sort of pumping your, groping your breasts and trying to express milk. And it was just, a bit of a shock. So to have that confidence and trust with a lactation consultant before you're in that position would be so helpful, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there's other ways. There's always breastfeeding groups. There's breastfeeding education packages you can buy, or you can actually go to a breastfeeding antenatal class as well. So I think just having a think about, right, is the birth education that you're going to be doing, has it got breastfeeding included, and has it got a large component of breastfeeding education? So that would be the main thing. Just have a look at that while you're pregnant. And then the second thing is all about support networks and your village surrounding you. So when you have your baby and you bring your baby home, breastfeeding is going to take up the majority of your day. You are going to be sitting in that chair, learning how to breastfeed your baby for day in, day out, hour in, hour out, night and day. And it's really good to have prepared beforehand who is your support network. So do you have family that are going to come, and are they able to drop some meals off? Does your partner know your wishes to breastfeed? If you don't let your immediate circle know about your wishes to breastfeed and how you want it to go, then when breastfeeding becomes hard, because breastfeeding becomes hard for everyone at some point, you don't want your circle to say something to you like, well, that's okay, just give a bottle of formula. Why don't you just do some formula now? Because if that's not what you want to do, if that's not your wishes, it can come across as insensitive, and then you can start putting blame on other people, and it can become a bit messy. So it's really good that your village just knows your wishes. It doesn't mean that you're not going to formula feed, but if you want to really give it a good go, if you don't want to be talking about formula when your baby's 2 weeks old, and just to have those discussions before. And the other thing is to think about your breastfeeding space and your visitors. So when you are learning to breastfeed, you can't be thinking about putting a breastfeeding blanket over you while your baby is feeding. It doesn't work when your baby's a newborn. You need to have your boobs out. You need to be sitting in your comfy chair. You need to be learning how to get that attachment right. You might be doing expressing as well. You might be doing with the pumps or with hand expressing. And with visitors, have a little bit of a plan before your baby arrives with, are you happy with visitors coming to see you at any time of the day, all day? Do you have huge families, which means you're going to have visitors in and out? Are you happy with them watching you breastfeed? You might be completely fine with that. But there's a lot of girls who feel very uncomfortable when they're learning how to breastfeed to have people in their space. So they will then retreat to the nursery to feed, which is great. But a lot of the time they will then feel rushed because someone's sitting in their lounge waiting for them. And it can become something that you've never even thought about when you're pregnant. It can become a really big thing when you just had your baby. So think about your village, think about the space that you want, and think about the support that you want around you. So education and support are my first 2 tips. When you've got the time in pregnancy, just to have a think about it would be my main point there.
Absolutely, because I'm sure that is something that most people have experienced, you know, whether or not it's an unexpected visitor drop by when you are sitting there with no top on, and just to have that thought process set in place so you know what to do or what are the options. I think it's a great piece of advice.
Yeah, and just having, your husband or your partner, how you feel when you're breastfeeding, so he can go and, say to his mum, look, so-and-so's still breastfeeding, she's having a bad day, she hasn't had a good sleep, and so we don't have to have those decisions when you're sleep deprived. You can talk about that before. So that's how it kind of works. And the third point is a really big one, because this is just so misunderstood, and that is about understanding what milk supply is, how milk supply is maintained and established, and what supply and demand really means. And so when you first have your babies come out, your placentas come out. As soon as your placenta has come out, there is a change of hormones. There is a rush of prolactin, which is the milk-making hormone, and there is a decrease in estrogen. Having a decrease in estrogen will then suppress ovulation, which makes milk making easier. So those are the 2 hormones. So when that happens, your body is turned into, okay, baby's now out, I can start making milk. But that is only the first part. If you had decided that you wanted to formula feed and you weren't going to breastfeed at all, and you just wore a bra and didn't touch your breasts at all, chances are you wouldn't even make any milk after that. So it doesn't mean that just because your baby and placenta are out that you're going to start making all this milk. You have to send messages to your brain that your baby is now sucking on your breast to make milk. And so if your baby is not sucking effectively or frequently enough, maybe attachment is really hard for you, maybe Bubs is not wanting to suck yet, maybe you're finding it really painful.
Bubs is sleepy,
Lots of things. And we're not effectively draining the breast. We're not actually going to make enough milk for our babies. So if Bubs is not feeding on the breast for whatever reason, we need to frequently express, whether that's hand expressing or whether that's with a pump. Every time we empty our breasts, messages are sent to our brain from our empty breasts to say, breasts are empty, you need to make more milk, and your body makes more milk. When your breasts are full, they're full of milk and Bubs is not sucking, messages are sent to your brain to say, there is lots of milk in those breasts, stop making milk. So if you had full breasts for half a day and weren't expressing, the messages for half a day going to your brain would be, there's too much milk there, stop making milk, stop making milk. And we would make less and less and less milk. So the only way to make an abundant milk supply is to have frequently empty breasts in those first 6 weeks. And so that is what supply and demand is. So you need to tell your body how much milk to make for your baby. And the best way to do that is to feed your baby on demand. So whenever your baby wants to feed, you feed him or her. And if your baby can't attach for whatever reason, you hand express as well. So supply and demand and milk supply, it's so misunderstood that you will often hear friends, and I'm sure all of you listening have probably heard this already, where a friend will say to you, I stopped breastfeeding because my milk dried up. It just stopped. I didn't have enough milk for my baby. I wasn't able to make enough milk. It just dried up. I had to stop. That is one of the biggest myths out there, because your milk doesn't just dry up. It can't just dry up. It only dries up when we give the body information to say, stop making milk. And the way we do this is by giving our baby a bottle, but not expressing. So we're not emptying our breasts frequently enough. And so our body just goes, make less milk, make less milk, make less milk. Maybe you're giving bottles of formula in the night and not expressing. So then over 12 hours over the night, you're not expressing at all. That'll just send messages to your brain to say, baby's not drinking at night. We don't need to make that much milk anymore. And for a true undersupply of milk, there is something called insufficient glandular tissue. So that means that when you've gone through puberty, you didn't make enough milk-making ducts in your breast. It's something you were born with. It's not something you can change. And then when you go into having your baby, you haven't got enough milk-making ducts in your breast to have enough milk for your baby. That is the only reason why you would have an undersupply, a true reason. But that is often overdiagnosed because it's quite a rare condition, really. A true insufficient glandular tissue condition is, it's less than 1%. A lot of the time we just say, we just can't make enough milk, we can't make enough milk, but usually it's because we just haven't frequently had our babies on the breast.
This episode is brought to you by Baby Bee, Australian-owned and designed prams combining quality, safety and style. Not only does Baby Bee let you try their prams at home with free returns for 9 months, yes, that's 9 months, they also offer an industry-leading 3-year warranty for total peace of mind. With thousands of 5-star reviews, around-the-clock customer care, and up to $300 of free accessories with every pram, what are you waiting for? Go visit www.babybeeonline.com and check them out for yourself. And yes, for listeners of the podcast, there is a 20% discount code. Enter FITBEE, FITBEE 20 at checkout, and T's and C's apply.
I hope that.
So you think it's more of a lack of support issue?
Yeah, absolutely. We just don't understand how to maintain our milk supply. And it's no mum's fault at all. It's just that we haven't got the education there to let mums understand pre-baby what it's all about.
Okay. Well, that's great. That's 3 really good points you've put forwards then, which I'm sure will be helpful to so many pregnant mums.
No. And the fourth one I wanted to talk about was all about breast pumps. So I don't recommend buying a breast pump in pregnancy because we don't know if we're even going to need one. So me personally, I've breastfed 3 of my children really well, all for 2 years each, and never used a breast pump ever. You don't need to use a breast pump to successfully breastfeed. So going out and buying an electric double-sided hospital-grade breast pump is going to be hundreds of dollars that you just might not use. But what I do recommend is understanding the different types of breast pumps so that when you're coming home and your baby's 4 days old and you're needing to pump, that you don't then have to go on Google and work out what is a pump, what are the different types, why do I need one and not the other, etc. So the kind of gold standard breast pump is an electric double-sided hospital grade pump. We want it if you are expressing all the time, so Bubs is not maybe on the breast at all and you're exclusively pumping for your baby, or you're going back to work really early and you're going to be pumping every day. You want to use a double-sided pump because if you don't have a double-sided pump, you're going to be doubling the time that you're sitting there expressing your breasts. So you want a double-sided. You want an electric pump because if you have a manual one and you're pumping every day, you're going to get really sore thumb and forefinger because you're continually going to be pumping that manual pump. And when I say hospital grade, there are normal electric pumps and there's the hospital grade ones. The hospital grade ones are the gold standard. They have a really good longevity, they have a really good suck cycle, and they last. If you were just pumping ad hoc, you might be pumping if you were just going to the hairdresser and leaving a bit of milk for the babysitter. You don't need to go and buy the hospital grade one. But if you are doing it every day, regularly, you may need to. If you got home from hospital and you needed a pump for a few weeks because you had a low milk supply, you don't have to go and buy one. You can always hire a breast pump. So depending on the hospital that you deliver at, some hospitals you can hire the pump from the hospital. I know here in Western Australia you can go to the main pharmacies and hire one from there, or you can contact the Australian Breastfeeding Association and see if there's a lactation counsellor in your area that has them to hire as well. The other thing is most girls know of it as the Hacker pump.
Is that the milk catcher?
Yeah, a milk catcher. So it's not exactly a pump because it doesn't have that pumping action. It just has a gentle suction on your breasts that catch the letdown of milk. And so that is just it's a one-piece silicone milk catcher that you place on your breasts to catch the letdown, to catch some oversupply, and to have a little bit extra for your baby. That's something you say if you wanted to buy, before you'd had your baby. It's not expensive.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that because is that something you'd put on your other breast? Say, for example, you're breastfeeding on the right side, you'd put that on the left side to catch that letdown? Yeah,
so this is one of the things that I talk about a lot because I worry. That is one of the reasons why girls use them, and they always talk about them as that's the reason. But my concern with that is you need to feed your baby both sides. And so a lot of girls in the beginning will say, I caught 70 mils on the right-hand side while I was feeding on the left. And I say, well, that's great, but now you have to use a bottle to give that to your baby, when really you just needed to feed both sides and you wouldn't have even needed to bother with the breast pump. So some girls would do it to catch if they're going to be giving top-up bottles in the evening. They may use it on the other side in the morning when you've got like an abundant milk supply. But always to think about the reason why we're using a breast pump. Do we need to, or can we just pop our baby on the breast rather?
Yeah, absolutely. With the catcher, I thought it was more because I remember just always creating a bit of mess and having to have a towel there. So it would just having the catcher on that side would prevent me having to get my top wet or my bra wet.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Some girls will have a really strong letdown on the other side, and that is exactly right. And then they want to catch the milk, and that's perfect. If some girls will never leak on the other side. So if if you are losing all your milk into a towel or into a breast pad, then yeah, absolutely catch it, and that's perfect. But for girls who haven't got that abundant milk supply and they're draining the breast on that side, maybe just have a little bit of a think about it. But they are really good because, you know, they're easy to clean. You can chuck it in your handbag, just good to have. And the other, not breast pump, but way to express your breasts is obviously just through that, using your hand to hand express. And the best time to hand express is when you've just had your baby, before your milk supply comes in and you've got the colostrum. So for girls that don't know, colostrum is the first milk that you make. It is made when you're about 20 weeks pregnant and it sits in your breasts, and it's thick, yellow, honey-like consistency. It doesn't flow really well. So if you were using a breast pump on your breast and you just had the colostrum, all that beautiful colostrum would just get stuck in the tubing because it's sticky and you're going to lose half of it anyway. So to actually hand express your colostrum to then give to your baby if you aren't able to breastfeed is a really great skill to have.
Yeah, great. And I know, I don't want to talk too much about this, but I know I have been asked by a few pregnant women, a few of my members have asked when they knew that you were coming to talk to them today, was they wanted to know about expressing when they're pregnant. So what are your thoughts about the manual expression during pregnancy?
Yeah, absolutely. So antenatal expressing is something that has gained a lot of traction in the last few years. When I first had my first child 7 years ago, yes, I was a midwife at that point, but we just didn't really talk about manually expressing in pregnancy. But certainly over the last few years, it's become more and more popular. Now, the reason that girls want to do it is because they want to have some colostrum stored in case when they've had their baby, their baby has lost a bit too much weight, your breasts are really your nipples are really tender and sore, and you don't want to feed, baby won't attach well, whatever the reason, rather than having to go and reach for formula if your baby has lost too much weight. You could be like, hang on, I've got all this colostrum that I've expressed in pregnancy ready to go. So it's fantastic when girls have that because you can then rather reach for that rather than reaching for the formula first. The other positive about doing this is learning how to express in pregnancy when you've got the time, gives you the confidence when you've had your baby that you can do it, that you do have milk flow, that you do have something for your baby. And a lot of girls feel so much more confident attaching their baby on the breast if they've been spending a few weeks getting to know their nipples, getting to know how the milk flows, how it feels when they've got the time in pregnancy. So those are the two reasons that you do it. A lot of women who have gestational diabetes in pregnancy will do this because their babies may have a drop of sugar, blood sugar level when they're born, and more likely to need some top-ups of milk as well. So the thing to remember with antenatal expressing is that you don't want to do it until you're 37 weeks pregnant, because there have been some studies, limited studies, to show that there might be a chance of putting yourself into preterm labour. If you were stimulating your breasts, you're releasing oxytocin, and that can stimulate your uterus to contract. And so we don't want to have any risk of that. So that's why you wouldn't do it until you were full term. And the other thing to note is if you were booked in for a cesarean section, if your midwife or obstetrician didn't want you to go into labour naturally, maybe you've got a breech baby, and there's lots of reasons. It might not be a good idea to do this because you don't want to put yourself into labour even after 37 weeks. And the other thing is to just talk to your care provider, whether that you're going through midwife group practice or whether it's an obstetrician. Talk to them about your plans or your hopes to antenatal express so they can guide you and they can let you know what their feelings about it, and they can give you the right equipment and they can show you how to do it correctly.
Okay. There's some good advice there. Always check with your doctor or midwife.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you. I feel that that's been a great little summary of ways to help prepare yourself for breastfeeding. So thank you very much for that, Susie.
Oh, my pleasure. I could talk about breastfeeding all day. So I loved coming and chatting with you.
we'll have to have you on again to talk about after you've had your baby, the newborn period.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Susie.
Pleasure, bye.
And before we sign off, please remember my team and I will also be putting together the show notes for this episode with all the links at www.fitnessmama.com/podcast. So be sure to head there to find out how to connect with Susie and how to enter the launch giveaway. Have a fabulous day, everyone, and I look forward to you joining me next week for another episode of the Fitness Mama podcast.